Hello and welcome to adQ&A Live episode 26. I'm Nick Sinitra and today we are talking about how your business is like a sailboat. Now, this episode is going to be a little bit more on the philosophy side and a little bit less on the kind of practical side, but I think it's kind of an analogy to demonstrate all the different pieces that are necessary for a business to perform well. I think it will serve. So buckle up and let's take a look. So first off, I apologize, I'm not the world's best artist. If you have ever sailed before, this might look like a monstrosity, so I apologize, but I'm gonna kind of go through and explain all the different components here and what they represent and how they fit together. So as a business, right, this sort of entire unit represents both your business and your product and your service and essentially all of the capabilities and the boons and the distractions that you have at your fingertips, right? And let's say that you want to get to a little island, right? This is not a very big whiteboard, so I apologize, the scale is going to be a little bit off, but somewhere off in the distance here, you have, a lush paradise island. We've got nice little palm trees there with coconuts and everything, and that's where you want to go, off in the distance. And this really represents your business objective. Maybe it is a certain amount of revenue, maybe it is a certain volume of sales, maybe it represents a percentage revenue growth comparing prior year's revenue versus this year's revenue. And your business here, your sailboat, you're trying to get there. Now, let's also pretend, if we could see under the water line here, that you actually do have a motor, right? So got underwater, you've got a motor here, and if you need to, right, there may be times where you need to turn on the motor because maybe the wind dies and, or maybe when you're getting out of the harbor, there's, you're too kind of closed off from the wind and you need to use the motor to get out on the open water, whatever it is, right? So you've got this motor and you've got a little bit of fuel, but ultimately your objective is to get to this island as quickly as you can with the least expenditure of fuel. Okay, so this will all start to make a little bit more sense as I talk about what all these different things represent, but just to restate, you, the sailboat, you want to get to this island as quickly as you can using the least fuel as you possibly can. So really the hull, right, kind of the principal element here, the hull of the ship really represents a couple of different pieces, right? So this is the foundational elements of your business. What is your unique selling proposition? Are you priced competitively in the market relative to your competition? It's going to be things like, so like what are different payment methods, let's say, that you offer. So for instance, you only offer a PayPal, or do you only offer Samsung Pay, or do you also accept credit card? Do you accept payment outside the United States and things like this, right? So it really represents once somebody's interested, your ability to basically convert that person, right? It's also foundational elements such as your site. So is your site mobile response, mobile optimized? Is it fast? It also pertains to things like now in this kind of post-Amazon world, do you have fast and or free shipping? All of these basic things that are sort of, you could almost think about it as being sort of like the amalgamation of the sort of post-click user experience, all the things that dictate, if somebody could buy your thing, can they do that, right? So here in this scenario, your hull looks really nice and smooth and clean, but let's say that you are not priced well compared to your competition, then it's basically the equivalent of having a whole bunch of barnacles or cracks or holes in your hull, right? Because at the end of the day, unless you have something else really incredible going for you, if you're not priced competitively, then that's a problem. So the second piece here is really, let's talk about the wind, right? So the wind, I think about as being also kind of a combination of a couple different pieces here. So part of it is addressable market, right? Let me back up and kind of start by saying that theoretically it's possible, because it is a sailboat after all, to get to the island using only your sails and not using the motor at all. The motor here ultimately represents paid media, right? And it's essentially, if you want to think about it that way, it's kind of a way to brute force motion, right, through the expenditure of fuel or resources, right? And if you could, you would love to just sail to the island without using any fuel, right? And that's hypothetically possible, but of course it depends on wind and sail, right? So what do those things represent? So the wind represents addressable market. So for instance, if you sell something that only homeowners could or would buy, then that's a certain addressable market, right? There's only so many homeowners out there. Maybe you only serve homeowners in the United States. Again, you've sort of taken, a circle, right, and you've reduced it down a little bit smaller. So homeowners out of total population in the United States, I don't really know what the number is, but let's just say hypothetically it's half, right? Everyone else rents, and you got half are actually homeowners. Of those, maybe, or this is, worldwide homeowners, maybe you can only serve in the United States. Well, okay, well, as you can see, that's a much smaller chunk, right? So that's like your addressable market. That's part of this. The second thing is really kind of purchase intent, right? So is this something that people who even fall within your addressable market could or would buy, or maybe even that they're aware of, right? If this is an entirely new kind of solar panel, right? I mean, yeah, it's solar energy, but there's like active solar, which is using photons, basically converting it into a usable electricity, or if it's passive solar, where maybe it's just you've got something to heat water, basically. So it's just basically using the thermal energy of the sun to heat water. Maybe there's some whole new kind of solar that does something incredible, right? People never heard about this, but it's way more efficient than solar, or it does something else amazing, right? So clearly, only somebody who owns a house would probably pay for something like that. Secondly, maybe because of various trade regulations or whatever, you can only sell in the United States, and so that's let's just say for the sake of argument, that's why that's reduced. So then maybe this technology is not proprietary, right? Maybe now there are multiple people that are doing whatever this is, this like, special solar, alternate version of solar. And now it's not just about who's the addressable market and is it something that people could or would buy or know about, but it's also sort of additional step in the user journey of, do they know about you, your specific offering? So this you would think about as brand awareness. So just to recap, really three elements. So one, basically addressable market. Then you've got sort of purchase intent, right? Within that addressable market, how many people kind of could or would buy that, right? That maybe, let's say they have the resources to buy that and are aware of it. And then there's, again, sort of like brand awareness. So yeah, maybe people want to buy this thing, whatever it is, but how many people want to buy your thing, right? Your specific one. So that's kind of wind. So if you are really niche, let's say, like maybe whatever you are selling has broad appeal, like it's, I mean, this is maybe a bad example, but let's say that we came up with a vaccine for cancer. I mean, sure, okay, we can vaccinate for HPV and stuff, forget about that, but just say like lung cancer. We found a vaccine for lung cancer. Well, clearly, like everyone would want that. Huge addressable market, it's worldwide, right? But maybe it's, $1,000. Well, that kind of plays into the whole a little bit, but also about this, it's now kind of addressing, purchase intent. Well, if it's out of people's capability to buy, then, there's not as much wind, right? So I'm going to kind of beat this analogy to death. And I encourage you, take it, run with it, do what you want with it. I just find it to be kind of a useful way to think about this whole kind of ecosystem. So then really the sales, right? The sales kind of the last thing that we haven't talked about. And what is that? So sales I look at as being sort of like, similar to the actual sailboat, how you are capturing the wind. So I think about this as more of your organic efforts. So it's things like maintaining a social media presence. It's things like SEO. It's things like maybe having influencers. It might be things like having social proof, reviews and things like this, right? It's basically taking advantage. Like, how do you take advantage of this buzz that's out there, right? This potential energy, and how do you convert that into motion, right? Part of it is the hull. Like, it has to be seaworthy in order to actually stay above water. That's kind of like the bare minimum. And that's why I've kind of talked about that being sort of the foundational elements that you need to have. Like, you need to have a thing that you need to have a differentiation from your competition. You need to have a site that actually works. You need to, allow people to pay with the methods that they want to pay with and all this kind of stuff, right? And then where I think about the sale is really being kind of a little step beyond that, which is like, okay, how do I kind of get people aware of me and all this kind of stuff, right? So let's maybe run through some scenarios about kind of different personas and how they sort of fit into this, right? And before we do, just like kind of as a thought exercise of the challenge for agencies, a lot of times it's not, the problem would be something like this, but it would be, we're really managing the paid media spend, right? So it might be, hey, we, the client, have been to this island multiple times before. In fact, we go every single month, and we know that it takes us 10 gallons of gas to get there, and we'll get there by the end of the month, right? And so your job as an agency, right, or you if you're watching, maybe a contractor, your job is to either get there in the same amount of time using less fuel, in other words, less media spend, but achieve the same outcome in the same amount of time, or it could be you can use the 10 gallons, but if you could actually get me to an island even further, right, that's even more lush and more verdant and more exciting on 10 gallons of gas, right, that's even better. That essentially means like a higher ROAS. You're spending 10 gallons of gas, but then you're getting an even greater outcome, right? And of course, the kind of parameters are going to be a little bit different for everyone. So maybe 10 gallons of gas is all you have. So it's like, how fast can you get there? Or how far can you go? And maybe sometimes you could actually go up to 15 gallons of gas. And maybe if you've never sailed there before, you don't know. Like, well, how much gas should I bring? That's kind of part of the question about defining a budget, right? A media budget. If you're concerned that all of your organic efforts and all the buzz that's out there is not going to be enough to get you where you need to go, you need to have a kind of a plan to determine, well, how much fuel do I need to bring in order to get to the island, right? When we've tried to do it in the past, let's say we know that, it's this level, but if you're going to be more efficient, like maybe you need less gas and so forth. So let's talk about some scenarios. So, one challenge you might face that I kind of alluded to before is if whatever it is you're selling is very niche, right? Maybe it's very new, nobody knows who you are. There's not a lot of wind, right? I'll just remove some of the, a little amped up, had some coffee, all right. I'll remove some of this wind. You have just like one little, dainty zephyr, and your sail could be raised all the way, right? You've got all your SEOs on point, you've got social media presence, you got all this stuff, but maybe whatever it is you're selling is like a brand new thing that nobody knows about, right? Then it's kind of like, okay, no matter how high your sail is, you can't really, there's only so far you're going to get with that, right? At that point, you're going to need to kind of supplement your efforts with some paid media spend. You're going to have to turn on the motor. You're going to have to expend some fuel. Now, the other options are you could also, slap on a bigger sail. Obviously, if you're out sailing, you don't always have the luxury of just having a bigger sail, but, just kind of go with me on this one. If you are sort of expanding your efforts from an SEO perspective, if you're, even let's say like if you somehow manage to go viral, like somebody basically picks up on the fact that you have this new offering and it's really revolutionary, then you're getting a little bit of extra wind. As a small brand, you don't really have the luxury of, imagine a scenario where, if Elon Musk comes out tomorrow and gives a press conference and he goes, hey guys, just so you know, we have a new Tesla coming out and it flies, by the way. It only costs $5,000 and it's already been approved by the FAA. And, they're good, right? Like every single news outlet in the United States is going to pick that up. It's insane wind. It's like ridiculous. It's a hurricane, category 5 hurricane of wind, and they didn't really have to do anything other than make that press release. But they're a known quantity already. I mean, they're a household name, and clearly, like that's something that everybody wants, right? But if you kind of imagine a scenario where, like, imagine some car company you'd never heard of made that same announcement, right? It would probably be met with skepticism. That company hasn't like landed any reusable rocket boosters or anything like that. People don't know who they are. Maybe a couple news outlets will pick it up, but even people who read about it may not be that buzzed about it. So until you get there, part of it is like, okay, well, if I've got less wind, I'm going to have to do more here from an organic perspective in order to capitalize on that. So I'm going to have to do influencer, SEO, social media presence, social proof, and really make sure that as and when people hear about me, I am scooping as much of that wind as I possibly can. And then, this is really the critical piece here. Like, so the whole, right, again, if I think about that as being, does your website load quickly? Do you have fast, free shipping to compete with Amazon? Can people pay with the methods that they want to? All of this, all of this stuff. They have a competitive price, right? A unique selling proposition, all this kind of stuff, right, really goes into this. If you're missing one of those things, even one of those things, it's like a rent in the whole, right? If you are missing more than one of those things, I mean, we're talking about a serious, tear in the hole, and you're taking on water and you're probably sinking, right? it's going to take you longer to get to the island at best, and at worst, you're going down, right? So those are really critical components that you need to have no matter what. And then as I talked about before, I mean, kind of the sail it's probably a little bit misleading to say that the sail it represents kind of like free energy, right? Free energy conversion, because clearly things like doing SEO and recruiting influencers and all this stuff do require some exertion. And that's kind of where the person comes in, is like, really this represents the individual or perhaps team that's involved in coordinating all these efforts. Even if it's if it's one person, they're really skillful at manipulating the sales, they can take advantage of that. So yeah, anyway, just a little kind of, I had to be in my bonnet and I was thinking about this and how all these different things fit together. But the key takeaways for me are that, really, just to kind of leave you with some parting thoughts, there's not one thing that's important here, right? Clearly, I would say your hull is the most important thing of all, because if that has problems, you're going to sink, right? You're probably not going to stay afloat, let alone get to the island. Secondly, there's wind, right? Which some of that is external. Again, clearly it's like how many people can actually buy your product. You can, if you're not selling it yet, you to a certain extent are dictating how much wind there is here, in the sense that if you see a demand for something and you want to sell that thing that has higher demand, there's going to be more wind. Of course, very likely there's going to be more competition as well, which means that you need to have bigger sails basically to capture that wind, because it's like you're in a regatta and you're jockeying for position and other people are scooping up your wind. So, and then sales, again, I kind of already talked about that one quite a bit, but it's like, when that wind does hit, do you have it configured in the right way, and do you have it raised enough to really take advantage and get motion out of that? Okay, that's all I got. I'll leave you with that. I realize that was probably a little bit meandering, but I think just in terms of a thought exercise, I think it's really fun to kind of think about how all those things interact, and how this journey, like a metaphorical and literal journey for a small brand, varies compared to a big brand. A big brand just kind of goes and just jumps in the boat, and it kind of practically takes itself to the island without any whole lot of work on their side. Whereas a small brand, or somebody who's new to market or has a niche product, I mean, you've got to be kind of Captain Ahab or something, really, to get where you want to go in one piece. So cool. I'll leave you with that. Thank you for watching. Hit us up in the comments if you have any questions or things that you want to hear us talk about in subsequent episodes, and tune in next time. Thanks again. Bye.